altogether anyway. Russell Westbrook and his agent, longtime agent, have parted ways. This is the agent who he has been with basically going back to right when he came out of college. And they parted ways, and the agent released a statement that I think gives us some interesting insight into where Westbrook's head might be right now. Woj, pick it up from there. What do we think Russell Westbrook is suggesting here when the agent tells us that he thinks Westbrook wants to move on?
In my conversations with Russell Westbrook in this offseason, I think as much as anything, he wants to be wanted. But look at his actions since the season ended. At the press conference for Darvingham and building a relationship with his new coach. You know, they have spent time talking, texting, communicating, you know, and trying to figure out the best way to use Russell Westbrook, if he's there this year, you know, to maximize him for that team. And then Summer League last week in Vegas, Russell Westbrook comes to town. He's sitting by the Laker bench with their young players. He's with them going in to halftime. So I think Russell Westbrook, you know, he wants to have success in LA. This is his fourth team in 4 years. His family, you know, obviously that was a big part of this, being able to go back to LA. He's been an integral part of that community. He grew up there. He doesn't want to bounce around every year. And this was in a lot of ways, a dream scenario to go back there. Last year did not go well. It didn't go well for him. Didn't go well for others on the Lakers. But I think for Westbrook, he wants to make this work, but he also knows he's been in trade talks. He continues to be in trade talks. And if there were teams who landed him, who had big cap space and had a really young team, they may not want a player at his stage in his career playing a lot of minutes or even necessarily being on the team because they're in full rebuilds. So it leads to certainly some uncertainty about what next year looks like for him.
To Adrian's point about Russell Westbrook and him being in trade talks, that message LeBron James was saying was, I know this team isn't good enough. And that's why he wants to play by himself, right? Because if it's him against everybody else, you might still pick LeBron over anybody in the league if you're trying to win one game. But you need 15 guys to win. And as we know, the Lakers, for a variety of reasons, have a roster that's very limited. And when you look at the Western Conference, to me, it's hard to see the Lakers being out of the play-in tournament mix, let alone being a team that's competing for championships, which is why, obviously, the Kyrie Irving situation sitting out there is sort of the one Hail Mary the Lakers have, that if that can come together, great. But as Adrian has reported a bunch, and as we've talked about a bunch, the Lakers are dependent on the Nets doing something there. It's not that the Lakers can go get something done. They're stuck. And so LeBron knows that, and that's why they are where they are.
Well, that's what I keep coming back to, Woj. I keep saying, and I don't mean this to sound as disrespectful to Russell Westbrook as I know it would appear, because he's had a great career, and who knows, maybe he does still have something left. He's a first-ballot Hall of Fame player. But based upon how bad the fit is, if they could turn Russell Westbrook into Kyrie Irving, that would be a basketball miracle. That would take the Lakers from a place where they realistically have no chance to really compete to a team that, Alan, a lot of people I talk to think could be a legitimate contender. Maybe not the favorite in the Western Conference, but you certainly wouldn't put it past them.
No, but you'd also have to, and again, I'm going to look at this from Jeannie Buss's eyes. I do think there is a bit of trepidation here after what you just saw happen across the river in Brooklyn the last year or two, where, you know, will the same thing come here now? Will we have to put up with some of this stuff because you know what precedes Kyrie Irving at this point in his career? But you have LeBron, and your hope is that he will have a little bit more of a leadership voice with Kyrie to not necessarily keep him in line. I don't think that's the right word, but I do think it's more or less keep him motivated to play basketball regularly and help them win.
Well, and so that, Woj, then brings us to what I think is really the question here. Can the Lakers do that? We've talked about it a lot last week. Tim just said it's dependent on the Nets. The Nets have to make the first move here. Walk us through what exactly we have with Kyrie Irving right now.
Hey, the Nets right now are focused on trying to find a Kevin Durant deal. I would be surprised if they did a Kyrie Irving trade, even if they do one at all, before they figure out what Kevin Durant's future is, whether that's getting traded before the season or perhaps does it become him starting at least training camp in Brooklyn. And I think for the Lakers, there's more out there for them than just Kyrie Irving. They have, you know, whether it's Eric Gordon. Now, these aren't all-star level players, but Eric Gordon, who certainly brings shooting, Buddy Hield from the Pacers. Those are two players they've talked about, both former Rob Pelinka clients from his agent days. And I still think there are other scenarios out there that maybe they're certainly not the level. There aren't many Kyrie Irvings out there, and they're certainly not available in trades. What the Lakers are trying to avoid is just absolutely mortgaging all of their future to get off of a contract, 2027 first-round pick, 2029 first-round pick. And I think right now, Brooklyn is going to deal with the Kevin Durant situation. I think, if at all, they're going to move Kyrie Irving.
And so maybe, Tim, to go back to the very beginning, that's the message LeBron is sending, which is my future is a year or two to be the player you're suggesting he still is, which I thoroughly agree.
Yeah.
I'm not worried about 27 and 29 and all these others, and I don't want you worrying about those either, particularly when I have a decision about my own future to make.
Yeah, I mean,
next
what
month.
have we seen for the past decade? It's been every time LeBron James has been on a team, he's wanted them to do more to win now, right? And that's certainly going to be the case when he wasn't in the playoffs last year, when he's missed the playoffs, a couple times in recent years. I mean, look, Alan said in the meeting this morning, we haven't seen LeBron James in months. Right? Comes out and plays in this game this weekend. Everybody's talking about LeBron James again, talking about it being a competitor again, talking about being the best player maybe in the world again. That's why he did that this week.
Historically, when LeBron James leaves a franchise, they rarely have a lot of draft picks left. Right?
Yes.
He never leaves a team, and it's like, look, they're loaded with 8 number ones. They're ready to go trade. Right? You're always trying to win right now with LeBron James. That's not unusual, and there's not necessarily anything wrong with it.
Right, and it's a price that Miami was willing to pay with 2 championships, with Cleveland winning a title the second time. And the Lakers have won a championship, but it's how deep is there a deal you can make without absolutely gutting all your assets? That's a GM's job to figure out that fine line and to not just jump into the first deal available there. But certainly there's still pressure on the Lakers.
A fact or fiction? Tim Bontemps, LeBron will win another ring in LA. Is that fact or fiction?
I'm going to say fiction. It's always risky to bet against LeBron James, as we talked about earlier. Very difficult for me to see this team getting back to championship contention with the current group they have right now. So I'll go against LeBron.
They got some work to do. We'll see if they can get any of it done. Alan Hahn, you're next. You know the Knicks as well as anybody does. Would Donovan Mitchell make the Knicks a playoff team? Would that be fact or fiction?
All right, how do we define playoffs? Would we say postseason, meaning play-in? If we're defining it that way, then yes, he makes them a playoff, play-in team.
No, playoff, not play-in.
Top 8?
Top 6.
Top 6?
Yes. That's a playoff team.
I'll answer for him. I'll answer for him.
It gets him out of relegation.
I'll answer for him.
Tim Bontemps, KD will be a net next season. Is that fact or fiction?
As of now, I'm going to say fact, as we've talked about a bunch. The offers that the Nets are looking for are not there, and I think until that changes, I think he's going to be a net. And with the getting past Summer League, going into the offseason now, everybody's going on vacation here for a bit. More and more likely every day, I think, that he's going to be a net. So I'll say fact.
Well, here's the good news. The man who never takes vacation is sitting next to me, and that's Adrian Wojnarowski. No one can answer this question better than you can. So, Woj, I have been campaigning on this show for the last week for the Nets to bring this thing back. And I know Alan disagrees with me, and I will give you the floor in a second. But look, they put together KD, Kyrie, and Ben Simmons because they thought, well, here's something that might actually win a championship. And we've never seen them play together. So unless they're getting offered the king's ransom that it's become clear from your somewhat quiet Twitter feed on this subject they're not getting offered, then to me it makes sense to run this thing back. As each day goes by, does it actually get likelier?
Well, yes, as each day goes by, it does. But the Nets are still trying to find a deal for Kevin Durant. I think if Kevin Durant came to Brooklyn and said, hey, I've changed my mind, I want to be here, I'm committed to this, well, of course they would want him to stay. But if Kevin Durant's not doing that, you're still trying to trade him. You want players who want to be there. You don't want the environment to be filled with players who are unhappy, who don't want to be a part of it. But they've got to get value for him, and they've got to get significant value for him. And the trade scenarios out there are still complex. Miami is a very motivated team, but we've been through it. Bam Adebayo and Ben Simmons can't be on the team together based on their contracts. There would have to be a lot of third and fourth team involvement. Phoenix is a little more limited now because they can't trade DeAndre Ayton. They were never going to trade Devin Booker. Do they have enough assets to do it? Toronto doesn't want to part with Scotty Barnes. That's their stance. I think Brooklyn right now wouldn't consider a deal without Scotty Barnes. And there are still other teams out there. But I think for the Nets, because Kevin Durant's got 4 years left on his deal, this is different than Kawhi Leonard, 4 years ago when he was going into the last year of the deal. That situation had hung over the Spurs. It was right around this time they moved him. there's no deal imminent for Brooklyn, but they are still trying to find a trade for
And to
Durant.
Adrian's point, when we were out in Summer League, the message you got from other teams was, we know that the Nets are in a position where they have a guy who doesn't want to be on their team, and so therefore they don't feel the need to put in every chip they've got because they don't think the Nets have a lot of leverage. And that's why you're in this push and pull here where the Nets have to try to keep extending this out, try to show they can have him be on the team, that they can deal with a situation where people might not be completely comfortable, because that's the only way they can generate leverage. Otherwise, everybody just looks at it and says they have to make